So
Yes.
we're going to start with some big news that I realized I flubbed last week. Boy, did I flub it, but we'll get to that in a second if you want to tee it up and start the conversation.
Sure. So it was hard to ignore, even though we don't talk about funding that often, every other week or so. This one was too big to ignore. OpenAI raised $6.6 billion with investments from everybody from Microsoft to NViDIA to Fidelity. Abu Dhabi came on board. So you've got states, you've got Thrive Capital, but you did not have Apple join after initially saying that they would. So, a bunch of interesting investors here. And then the amount itself, 6.6 billion, obviously a gigantic amount of money that to go into any company. And now all of a sudden, OpenAI is valued at something like $150 billion, give or take. So obviously this company has come out of nowhere, and apparently as part of this they are actually going to finally become a company as well, which we've talked about this in the past, where it's been very confusing to try to figure out, is OpenAI a nonprofit or is it a for-profit company? And all of this is happening in light of basically the entire executive team seeming to be jumping off ship right now. So a lot of interesting things happening there.
Yeah, my big flub was last week. I threw out that they were raising 650 billion, which the reality is these numbers are so big it might as well have been. Obviously, it was at the time the rumor was 6.5 billion, which
Yes.
was pretty close to where they actually landed. It is a staggering amount. In our prep notes, you sent me a question saying the big question with this is it enough because they are losing $5 billion a year, and I thought that's a great point. It's on the
Mm.
one hand a staggering amount of money, and on the other hand losing a staggering amount of money. Now, on the upside, I will say one of the other things that they announced as part of this is they're on pace to generate 3.6 billion in revenue, which is a very important thing because a lot of these companies, even these big valuations, and even in the AI space, are in fact not generating a lot of revenue. So, while clearly not enough revenue to cover their losses, um, at the very least it's showing they're the real deal. It's a real company. It's a big company. They're driving lots of value in all of that. um, but the question is it in fact sustainable? I believe they also announced another $4 billion in lines of credit, so that gives them a couple of years of runway. But you do have to start questioning, and we're going to talk in a moment, I think, next about Microsoft maybe starting to take some of the hits from some of these investments, and I think it's in this really interesting period. We talked last week about Goldman Sachs having the kind of bull versus bear conversations, and I think this is going to just fuel those conversations about, can you justify this level of investment over this period of time? Will it actually pay off? And I'm bullish overall, but I think from an investment standpoint, I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah. So I feel like the last time something like this really happened in tech, I'm not going to count crypto for now, but I'm going to go back to when Amazon Web Services got started, and we saw them put down losses year after year after year. And a lot of people on the financial side wondered whether this made any sense at all and why people were throwing money at this company that wasn't making any money for so many years. But honestly, I think that everybody is, and then it happened again with Uber, which eventually turned its way around. So I think at this point on the tech side, people are just kind of bought into the idea that it's going to take 20 or $30 billion in losses to create the market leader in this AI space, whatever it ends up being. And I think that this 6 billion, as big as it sounds, is not going to be enough to get OpenAI to the finish line. So when we're talking about 3, 4, 5 years from now, from the when the actual market leader ends up being established, whoever ends up winning is probably going to have to raise at least one or two more rounds that are about this
Well,
size.
Yeah, I think there's two issues here. The first is that it's not just the cost of developing the technology, but part of the reasons those losses are so big is that they are having to drive an insane pace because this is a full out arms race. And
Mm-hmm.
so that I think is part of it. And then the second thing, and this is the Goldman Sachs point of view, or at least the bear on the Goldman Sachs side of it, is that unlike a lot of other technologies where the scale was almost all free, here the scale is actually quite expensive. And
Yes.
so that begs the question is it sustainable in the long run? Will they reach this tipping point where it's not right? If you talk about Uber, well, most of those losses with Uber, even Amazon, most of those losses were in buying the market, in getting out there and owning so much of it, either through discounting or through just the growth, the
Mm-hmm.
rapid expansion. But eventually, the scale tipped in their favor,